everyone. Are you seeing the slides?
Yeah.
So the goal of this paper is to argue that we are capable of acting in light of facts in a strong sense. In particular, I will argue that acting in light of a fact cannot be reduced to acting in light of a true belief. So that acting in light of facts is not the same as acting in light of true beliefs. My starting point is a very simple argument for the claim that we can act in response to facts. Here it is. We are able to act in response to normative reasons. We are beings that are capable of identifying reasons to act and acting in response to them. Our normative reasons are facts, usually facts about the circumstances we find ourselves in. For instance, the fact that there is somebody trapped in a building on fire is a reason for a firefighter to go in, or something like that. It's usually this kind of fact that gives us reasons to act. And if that's so, therefore we are capable of acting in response to facts. If we are capable of acting in response to normative reasons, then we should be able to act in response to facts. One common reaction to this claim is to deflate it. This reaction is manifested in the view of those who hold that we always decide to act in light of our beliefs, and that talk of acting or deciding to act in light of facts should be understood as an elliptical way of talking about deciding to act in light of true beliefs. The main support for this view comes from arguments from error cases. That is, cases in which the agent decides to perform an action in light of the consideration, the F, but her belief, the F, turns out to be false. In one such case, the agent cannot be said to have decided to act in light of the fact that the F, since F was not the case. So we should say that in error cases, the agent cannot be said to have decided in light of a fact. Rather, she must have decided to act in light of a mere belief. But now compare two cases, a case in which the agent decides to run because she sees that her bus is about to leave, and a case in which the same agent decides to run because she falsely believes that her bus is about to leave. If we restrict our attention to the episodes of practical thinking that resulted in the agent's decision in each case, that is, the bus is about to leave, so I better run, we will be unable to distinguish between them. Subjectively, the episodes of practical thinking in question are indistinguishable. From the standpoint of the agent engaged in the practical thinking, the activities of deciding to act in an error case and deciding to act in a success case are indistinguishable. Supporters of this argument say that it follows from this that the agent is doing the same thing in both cases. Since we know that in an error case, the agent is deciding to act in a mere belief, we should conclude that we always act in light of mere beliefs. And so that to act in light of a fact is simply to act in light of a true belief. I think this conclusion is mistaken and it should be resisted. And here is a counterexample to it. Sue believes she has a paranormal power. She often has vivid dreams and she believes them to be premonitions. These premonitions have proved wrong more often than not, but she has not taken heed of this fact and continues to believe in her prophetic power. One fine day, she has a particular vivid dream in which she sees men plotting to rig the federal lottery so as to ensure that the next winning numbers will be 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. In light of this dream, Sue comes to believe that the lottery has been rigged. She decides, in light of this consideration, to place a bet on those numbers. As it turns out, the lottery had been rigged, so that those will be the winning numbers. In this example, Sue decides to place a bet in light of a true consideration that the lottery had been rigged, and she does place the bet. But it is extremely implausible to say that Sue's action was a practical response to the fact that the lottery had been rigged. The reason why we cannot see Sue's action as a practical response to the fact that the lottery had been rigged is that she is in no way aware of the fact. There is no sense in which Sue is acting in light of the fact that the lottery had been rigged. Rather, Sue is simply acting in light of her true belief that the lottery had been rigged. This is reflected in the fact that it is inappropriate to say that, open quotes, Sue placed a bet because the lottery had been rigged. That seems wrong. Rather, we should say that she placed a bet because she believed that the lottery had been rigged. So Sue acted in light of a true belief that the lottery had been rigged, but she did not act in light of that fact. We must distinguish, therefore, between two activities: acting in light of a true or false belief and acting in light of a fact. And that shows that the argument from error cases with which we started our discussion is unsound, for its conclusion collapses the activities of acting in light of a fact into the activity of acting in light of a true belief. But where does the argument goes wrong? I believe that the true premises 1 and 2 are very plausible. It seems trivial that an agent cannot decide in light of a fact when there's no fact, when the consideration in light of which she decides is not a fact. And it seems very plausible to say that error cases and success cases of decision here cannot be distinguished, can possibly be indistinguishable from the agent's own perspective. So if the argument is unsound, it must be invalid. One could suggest that the problem with the argument is in the move from premise 2 to the conclusion 3. From the fact that two things are indistinguishable from a particular standpoint, it does not follow that they are the same. But I believe that in this particular case, the move from 2 to 3 is valid. And that's because the reason why the activities mentioned in 2 are indistinguishable is that, at least in a particular sense, the agent is doing the same thing in both cases, that is, in error cases and in success cases. To see that, consider how we would answer the question, why are the activities of deciding in an error case and deciding in a success case indistinguishable from the standpoint of the agent engaged in practical thinking? The answer seems to be that because the agent is doing exactly the same thing in both cases, namely taking such to be the case, and in light of that consideration, deciding to perform a particular action, or which is the same, in both cases, the agent is exercising capacity for practical thinking. This seems to me to be correct. But to accept that is simply to accept 3, at least giving a very natural reading of 3. According to this reading, we should take 3 as the claim that both in error cases and in success cases, the agent is doing the same thing, namely deploying her capacity for practical thinking. Rather, I believe that the problem with this argument is in the move from 1 and 3 to the conclusion 4. The problem is that this move ignores the distinction between successful and unsuccessful deployment of our capacity for practical thinking. The fact is that even though it is true that both in error cases and in cases in which the agent acts in light of a fact, she is doing the same thing, namely deploying her capacity for practical thinking, it doesn't follow that there is no difference between acting in light of a fact and acting in light of a belief. The difference between the two may be a difference between a successful or perfect deployment of her capacity for practical thinking and an unsuccessful or flawed deployment of that capacity. So in order to show that this argument is invalid, we must show that the cases in which the agent acts in light of a mere belief, be that belief true or false, are cases in which her capacity for practical thinking are not successfully deployed. That is what I turn to now. When somebody acts in light of a fact, it is possible to understand one's action as a response to that fact. That is, I can see the action as an intelligent reaction to features of the situation in which the agent acts. I cannot understand the action in the same way when the agent is not acting in light of a fact, even if the agent decides to act in light of a consideration that happens to be true. That much is made clear by the counterexample I present, right? In that example, she's acting in light of a true consideration, but there's no way of saying that she's reacting intelligently to a feature of her situation. She's not. But practical thinking aims at producing actions that are intelligent reactions to facts. That becomes clear when you consider the form practical thinking usually takes. Consider Sue again. She fails to act in light of a fact, but her practical thinking is still an effort to regulate her action in light of the facts. Her practical thinking is reasonably reconstructed as follows. Open quotes. Given that the lottery had been rigged, betting on those numbers is a sure way to win. so I'll do just that. This piece of practical thinking starts from a putative fact and ends with a decision to act somehow. It reveals a lot about Sue. It tells us something about what are her beliefs and what she desires, and gives us a glimpse of her character. But it also presents her as attempting to adjust her behavior in light of the fact, even though she ends up acting in light of a mere belief. Cases such as Sue's are therefore cases in which the agent's practical thinking and the ensuing action are defective by the agent's own standards. She sets out to adjust her behavior in light of the relevant facts, so that her action will be an intelligent reaction to those facts, but she failed to do so. Indeed, any instance of practical thinking that hopes to result in action must start from the consideration of a putative fact. It will be preposterous, for instance, to ascribe to Sue practical thinking of the form, open quotes, suppose that the lottery had been rigged. If that was the case, betting on those numbers would be a sure way to win. So I'll bet on these numbers. That seems nonsensical. You cannot engage in practical thinking starting from a mere supposition. One cannot move from supposition to a decision without endorsing the supposition. Practical thinking, therefore, simply is an attempt at adjusting one's behavior in light of the facts. So to engage in practical thinking is to set out to adjust one's behavior in light of the facts that constitute the situation in which one finds oneself. Our capacity for practical thinking is perfectly manifested only on the condition that that attempt is successful. When one fails on that attempt, one's practical thinking is defective according to the standards that are internal to the activity itself. That means that by those standards, our capacity for practical thinking does not live up to expectations when we end up acting in light of a mere belief, even a true belief. Our capacity for practical thinking are successfully deployed, perfectly manifested, when we decide to act in light of facts, and the ensuing action be seen as an intelligent, intentional reaction to those facts. So we can distinguish between two ways of acting in light of consideration: acting in light of fact and acting in light of belief. When you act in light of a fact, your practical thinking is successful, at least from this standpoint. And when you act in light of a true belief, even a true belief, your practical thinking is flawed by its own standards. This allows us to defend a kind of disjunctivism about acting in light of a consideration. From the standpoint of the agent, the cases in which her capacities for practical thinking are successfully deployed, and the cases in which they do not work properly, such as in Sue cases or other error cases, are subjectively indistinguishable. So the successful case and the error case, or the flawed case, can be subjectively indistinguishable. In all these cases, the agent takes herself to be deciding to act in light of a fact. In particular, Sue's practical thinking would look exactly the same if she was aware of the fact that the lottery had been rigged. She would decide to place the bet in light of the fact, the presumed fact that the lottery had been rigged. If you take seriously the distinction between acting in light of a fact and acting in light of a belief, it follows then that there are two distinct but subjectively indistinguishable ways of acting in light of a consideration. One can either act in light of a fact, or one can act in light of a belief. The fact that they are subjectively indistinguishable should not prevent one from distinguishing between them and from saying that in one case the action in question is an intelligent response to a fact, whereas in the other case it is not. The view I'm defending here has the following structure. Episodes of practical thinking come in two kinds: those that result in an agent acting in light of the fact, and those that result in the agent acting in light of a belief. From the standpoint of the agent, episodes of the two kinds may be indistinguishable, but that is compatible with the claim that in the successful case, one manages to adjust one's behavior in light of the fact, and therefore one's action may be understood as a reaction to the relevant facts. Whereas in the unsuccessful case, it only seems to the agent as if she's adjusting her behavior in light of the facts, but that's not the case. And therefore, her action cannot be understood as a response to a fact. And I'm arguing that accepting this kind of disjunctivism about acting in light of a consideration is the way to go to reject the arguments from error cases and take seriously the idea that they are capable of acting in light of facts. Here's a possible objection to this view. The objection is that even though we cannot reduce acting in light of a fact to acting in light of a true belief, as the argument from error cases would suggest, we can, for all I have said, reduce acting in light of a fact to acting in light of the belief that F, while knowing F to be the case. After all, the reason why Sue fails to act in light of the fact that the lottery had been rigged seems to be that she has no knowledge of the fact. The objector could hold, then, that for all I have said, it may be the case that we always act in light of beliefs, but that there are two ways of doing so, namely, to act in light of the belief that F, knowing F to be the case, to act in light of the true belief that F, without knowing F to be the case, and to act in light of the false belief that F. My answer to this objection is the following. We always decide
Rafael,
to act... Desculpa.
5 minutes.
Okay. We always decide to act in light of a particular consideration. A known consideration is a fact. For knowledge is always knowledge of a fact. So when one decides in light of a known consideration, one decides in light of a fact. But this leads to a further problem, a further difficulty, which is the following. It is possible for two agents to decide to act in light of the consideration that F, but for one of them to decide to act in light of the fact that F, while the other decides to act in light of the true belief that F. The latter agent is not deciding in light of the fact of a fact, and the consideration in light of which she acts is not a fact. If you accept that both agents act in light of the same consideration, then the former agent cannot be acting in light of the fact as well. This will mean that the very fact that we can decide to act in light of a true belief without deciding to act in light of a fact, as two cases show, will mean that we never really act in light of a fact in a strong sense. The solution to this problem is to adopt a disjunctive conception of considerations, or to extend our disjunctive view of acting in light of considerations to the considerations themselves. We should say that a consideration in light of which you decide is either a mere belief consideration or it is a fact. Two considerations may be subjectively indistinguishable, but different nonetheless, for while one is a fact, the other is not. Just to conclude, I think that this disjunctive conception of considerations is necessary to defend Jonathan Dempsey's account of motivating reasons. Dempsey's theory is motivated by the idea that we are capable of acting for good reasons. That if we are capable of acting for good reasons, then it should be possible for our motivating reasons to be normative reasons. Now, normative reasons are facts. So Dempsey is committed to the idea that our motivating reasons can be facts as well. I agree with this view. When we act in response to a fact, our motivating reason should be the fact itself. But the claim that having a true consideration as one motivating reason is not enough for one to act in light of a fact, as demonstrated by Sue's case, seems to create a problem for the view that our motivating reasons can be identical to facts. For motivating reasons, as Dempsey conceives of them, the considerations in light of which we decide to act. Sue's case shows, however, that one can decide in light of a true consideration and yet fail to decide in light of a fact. Therefore, the true consideration in light of which Sue decided to act is not a fact. At first view, it seems that if she knew that the lottery had been rigged, she would have decided in light of the same consideration, namely, that the lottery had been rigged. If that consideration was not a fact in the original example, how could it be a fact now? It seems that it cannot be a fact at all. And then it seems as if the very possibility of acting in light of a true belief without acting in light of a fact will show that the considerations in light of which you decide to act can never be facts. For you could always decide to act in light of these considerations without deciding to act in light of a fact. Given that motivating reasons are considerations in light of which we decide to act, it will follow that motivating reasons are never facts, therefore are never identical to normative reasons. This is a serious problem for them to try to write out the motivation of that view. The way out of the problem is to deny that an agent that acts in light of a true belief that F, and an agent that acts in light of a fact that F, decide to act in light of the same consideration. And the disjunctive conception of considerations allows us to do just that. Even if there is a sense in which both agents decide to act in light of the same consideration, in that their motivating reasons are expressed in exactly the same way, in another sense, the considerations in light of which they decide are different, in that one is a fact and the other is not. Dance's claim that motivating reasons should be the right sort of thing to be normative reasons can only be defended, therefore, if one accepts the disjunctive view defended here. That's it. Thank you for listening. Here are some reference on the work, the paper. Thank you.
Thanks, Rafael. We have time for 10 minutes for questions.
I have a question. Thanks for the presentation. Well, I was thinking about your presentation, and it reminds me about Plantinga critique to naturalism. Okay, I don't know if you're familiar with this text.
I'm not, so let's see.
Okay, but I'll try to explain in the best way possible. Plantinga is a theist, and he defends the existence of God and things of sort. But this critique of him is really a good one. Okay, and while I will not explain it all over, but one thing that he will claim is that sometimes, and I'll try to use your counterexample as a kind of counter example. I use the example of a girl that claims to be a psychic, and saw saw an event in her mind that shows her that the lottery was rigged, and she knows the numbers. Okay, and it occurs that she goes, makes a bet and wins. Okay. This is to try to show that when people are moving to do some sort of action, she can be what moves that person can be the same thing that moves the ones that commit errors. Okay. But the thing is, what is difficult here is to understand that there is no possible way to say. You can say that it's that the probability is pretty low, but in epistemic, in an epistemic way, there is no way to prove that she's not really a psychic, and that she really has a power. And that what she did was to follow an urge that comes from a knowledge, a true knowledge. And there is no way we can prove that. I know that it sounds crazy, but if we think hard on the situation, this is right to assume that although this is a slight possibility, it can be the case that her epistemic apparatus is good and ours has some problem. And there's really no way that we can prove that it's wrong. You see, I know that it sounds extreme, but if you think well, you'll see that really there is no way that we can do this kind of, I think that I should be showing myself. I'm not running from anyone. I'm here. So what I was saying is that there is no way we can prove that. some truth makers are really hard to obtain. Okay, even in physics and science, there is something that you only know about through calculus and all this stuff, mathematics. And in this case, it's not different. The truth is, if we don't have the truth maker and a person acts on an urge that she says is a knowledge, and that thing proves to be true, it makes things hard to us to prove the other way around. Okay, even though it's really it really looks crazy, but she says, I have a power and I will prove it, and she proves. So what can I tell? You see, I can argue in other ways, but strictly epistemic speaking, I have no means to say you are wrong. Maybe I am the one that is wrong, you see?
Okay, I chose Sue's example because I thought it would be absurd enough that no one would ever say that there was a chance of she knowing the fact, but that's not really central to me. What's crucial to me is the difference. The difference is whether the agent is in contact with a fact, is aware of a fact in which, or it's not. So suppose that she did have a kind of psychic power, and she was in touch somehow in a way we cannot comprehend with the fact that the lottery had been rigged. My point is that if that was the case, if she had knowledge in this particular case, we don't have to speak of knowledge, but we can speak of being in touch with the fact or being aware of the fact. If she had that kind of power, then she would have acted in light of a fact. And that means that the episode of practical thinking would have changed. If she's not aware of the fact, then she's deciding in light of a mere belief. And that's a flawed exercise of practical thinking. That was my point. But if she's aware of the fact, she's in contact with it somehow, then the episode of practical thinking that resulted in her decision changes in nature. It becomes, now it's no longer flawed in any way. It's a perfect episode of practical thinking if you ignore moral constraints and stuff like that. But from a purely formal standpoint, it's a successful episode. It results in her adjusting her behavior in light of the facts. So it results in her action being an intelligent reaction to the situation she finds herself in. Now, if we cannot distinguish between cases in which the agent has knowledge or doesn't have knowledge, or cases in which the agent is aware of the fact or is not aware of a fact, I don't think that would affect the argument in any way. There would be a gray area here in which we cannot say if the person was acting in light of a fact or acting in light of belief. But if you admit that there is a matter of fact about whether or not she had knowledge, even though we cannot ascertain it, there is a matter of fact about whether or not she acted in light of a fact or whether she acted in light of a mere belief. I don't know if that was clear.
Yeah, it was pretty clear. Okay. Yeah, but I suggest that you read Plantinga.
Okay.
I think it really can help you on this issue. But okay, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rafael. We have no more time for questions.
Okay.